Okay, thank you. And thank you everyone who has joined us for this webinar session today as we explore the challenges of biosecurity on farm and discuss navigating growing and changing risks in managing AI and other emerging diseases. I'm Jen Griffith, I'm the Head of Marketing here at LiveTech, and I am delighted to welcome our panel for today. Julian Sparry, Technical Director for LiveTech. I have Moira Burnett, Technical Director for the British Poultry Council, Grant Olive, the Director of Digital Transformation at LiveTech, and Sarah O'Grady, UK and Ireland Sales Manager for Kershaw. So let's jump straight in. With AI very much at the forefront of our minds, what are the most common biosecurity weak points that you guys see when working with poultry producers, and how can they be addressed? Julian, let's start with you.
Thank you, Jen. I suppose if I'm really honest, the thing that worries me is poor implementation of step over barriers as you go in and out of sheds. They need to be really an easy and convenient way to change your boots as you go from outside to inside a poultry shed or any livestock shed. They don't need just to be a trip hazard. So if I wanted one change that everybody did, it would be a really good design of step over barrier to help you change your boots as you go into a livestock area.
Perfect, thank you. Moira, is there anything that you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, well, I think we all know that biosecurity is only as strong as its weakest link, and failings can often be traced back to routine slipping rather than a lack of awareness. So those common issues we're seeing across farms stem from human error, infrastructure gaps and poor compliance with routine measures. The Poultry Health and Welfare Group worked with APHA to put together a very, very useful photo book that visually contrasts good and poor biosecurity based off of what APHA has identified on the ground in recent AI outbreaks. And it's a really excellent tool for managers and farmers to assess their own sites and identify areas for improvement. It just things like, leaky roofs, improper use of foot dips, uncovered bedding outside of poultry sheds, pooling of water. I think all the things that everybody really sort of should be aware of. The photo book is being updated. We've got some sort of recent pictures of good and also some suboptimal biosecurity. So that'll be updated soon and shared on our website.
Excellent, thank you, Moira. Sarah, is anything you'd like to add to that one?
Yes, I'd say that one of the things we see frequently are failures within the C&D process itself. Now, we understand it's a hugely time-sensitive procedure, and it's quite easy for steps within the C&D process to maybe happen in the potentially wrong order concurrently, and failure, I suppose, sometimes from a biosecurity perspective, really to see how we're managing those. So, for example, we occasionally see when time is precious to us that we may have areas of the farm that are being rinsed out post-detergent, and then areas that have been disinfected. And one of my sort of personal areas of interest is when control rooms get disinfected following the disinfection of a shed. And it can be a very critical stage when we have maintenance workers on farm, we've got contractors there, and there is no foot dips out, because we're at that very critical post-detergent, pre-disinfection stage. So for me, it's just ensuring, I suppose, that the process follows the right steps in the right order. And that would be an area that can sometimes be impacted during the C&D process.
Okay. And do we think then that biosecurity management then is seen as an administrative burden, or how can we move that to something that's more practical, manageable, and then ingrained in those day-to-day routines? Sarah, do you want to continue that conversation there?
Yeah, I mean, it's to do with culture, isn't it? When a task becomes a habit, and it becomes ingrained in the culture of the business, then we no longer see it as being something that we have to do, but it is just a necessity and it's a way of working. So really the management team need to be flying the flag for biosecurity, and they need to be making sure that the team are regularly trained and there's very simple steps that they can follow. So it becomes part of their daily routine, even if it's just 10 minutes at the beginning of the day. And with that habit and repeated sort of I've lost the word for it, but repeated use of those systems, it can become part of the culture. And I think that it is a mindset, and it needs to come from the people which are driving decisions on farm. That is the management team, whether it's the farm manager, the regional manager, or whoever is involved in that process. And it's also a case as well of working with biosecurity companies, with the vets, and ensuring that the information is regularly given, it's most up to date, and it's something that people can relate to and see the benefit of.
Absolutely. Moira, is there anything you'd like to add to that one?
Yeah, I think shifting biosecurity from that admin burden to an ingrained practical routine, I think practical routine starts with making it a second nature, something that isn't just a tick box, but an instinctive part of the operations, as Sarah said. So, it isn't practicing good biosecurity just for the sake of it. It's about doing the right thing all of the time. Putting birth health and welfare first, and then reducing the risk at every opportunity. So I think if we can change that behaviour, and it makes biosecurity less of a task and more of a shared opportunity, then I think we might see that behavioural change.
Yeah, thank you so much. Absolutely. So what role do we think then investment in biosecurity plays in the sort of on-farm and farm resilience? And how can we ensure farmers see that a return on any investment that they're making? Moira, would you like to start with that one?
Yeah, I think ultimately biosecurity is not an isolated cost. It is an essential investment in the stability and long-term viability of poultry production. I think the return on investment is clear. Strong biosecurity reduces the risk of disease, which then leads to healthy flocks and increased productivity. So protecting bird health isn't just a nice thing to do. It's also about securing the future of the business. So I think making that link both financially and strategically should help ensure farmers view biosecurity as fundamental rather than optional.
Absolutely. Grant, is there anything you'd like to add to that one?
Yeah, I think it's great. I think it's an amazing point. But I think also the investment can come just in the farmer's time and effort that they put into making those changes and how we do it. And I love the fact we're talking about creating those habits. Because that's what's going to lead us to better processes on our farms and better ways of doing things.
Absolutely. So then collective resilience and knowledge sharing on an industry-wide basis might actually be the key to this. So Moira, what do you think about that? How do we share information and how do we build that collective resilience?
Yeah, absolutely. I think encouraging greater industry-wide collaboration does require bringing all the players together, not just the commercial sector, but also the small holders, the hobby keepers, everyone who keeps birds, because they all play a vital role in disease prevention. A recent study by Cambridge University, as part of the FluMap project, concluded they looked into farmers' perception of biosecurity, and that study found that farmers would benefit from further guidance and support on how AI is spread, and more information on adapting biosecurity to prevent disease incursion. The study found that farmers, there was no sort of one-stop shop, they could get information on biosecurity from different sources. And it's almost like bringing all that together. And that's sort of the role that the DEFRA Poultry Biosecurity Group is now looking at. Is bringing all these elements together, whether that's training or communication, and to be able to put out that sort of information, perhaps in one place that all bird keepers could access, rather than having to sort of find your way around, especially around gov.uk, which can be very, very tricky. So I think that's that project we're doing with DEFRA still very much in its early days. But I'm hoping that programme will support industry in building a more resilient future.
Thank you, Moira. Jules, is there anything else that you'd like to add to that one?
I think Moira's absolutely right, that we perhaps need a bigger push on the more practical elements of biosecurity training in a way that people can understand how to implement it on their farm, whether it's at small scale or full commercial scale. We've learned a lot of lessons over the past 3 years about how potential biosecurity breakdowns are causing pathogens to come in, and it's sharing that new information. As Moira said, the book on good practices being updated, and what we need are examples of how people can implement that at all scales of farming, and having it in one space, one source of truth would be really good.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you so much. So then, thinking about innovation in biosecurity and disease management, what innovations that are coming down the line have the greatest potential to transform resilience in the sector? Grant, if I might come to you for that one.
Yeah, and I think just sort of continuing on the conversation of sharing and the industry, I think digital transformation programs that I've seen working really well is really just making that information available for everyone out there, so easy access to the information. And it's something that we strive really improving all the time. How do we get it out there? How are we making it available to the public and the government and an industry sector? I think it's really important that we continue sharing the data. We continue getting those data points through. We validate the data, and we keep referring back to what we've learned. As a digital person myself, it's about moving that 1% forward every day and making sure that we're getting better at it. Again, referring to those habits, and really getting good at what we do.
Absolutely. Sarah, is there anything you'd like to add to that one?
Yes, well, I think that one of the ways that we could be innovative, and I'm not sure if this is the right context, but is looking more closely at the way we've always done things and seeing how we might be able to improve on those. And certainly when we're looking at cleaning and disinfection, we've always relied on a good disinfectant to sort of carry us through potentially the issues surrounding a poor wash. So I think for ourselves, it's how we can change perception and look in more detail at the cleaning stages and the types of cleaning chemicals we're using. Certainly things that are working more biologically, like enzymatic cleaners, maybe something that we will see more of. Equally, looking at the microbiome itself within the poultry sheds and establishment, how we might be able to propagate a more healthy microbiome, not only within the bird, but within the farm itself. So there are absolutely things that are coming down the line from a biosecurity manufacturer's perspective, and that is all around sort of maybe innovating the way people previously thought about the process and how they apply chemicals at turnaround.
Excellent. And so actually then for the whole panel really, but let's start with Moira on this next section. Is it realistic to envision a future with everything that we know where highly impactful diseases like avian influenza are actually eliminated? Or do we really need to shift our focus to a long-term management strategy? What do you think about that one?
I think that would be the dream to eliminate AI, but I think it's here to stay. It's something we have to manage now on an annual basis, not every couple of years, and also all year round. And so I'd like to touch a little bit on vaccination as sort of longer term strategy, because I think vaccination could play an important role as part of a broader strategy to control AI, such as biosecurity, flock management, and surveillance. It's not the silver bullet, and it should never be a substitute for poor biosecurity. And stamping out still remains the most effective control method. But we've seen the rise in AI in the last couple of years, and we've also seen advancements in vaccine technology. We're seeing that in practice now in France, for example, and there are pilot studies going on in other countries. And so the Joint Industry Government AI Vaccination Task Force, of which we are part of, is exploring the availability of cost-effective vaccines, looking to the future of a potential sort of strategy here in the UK, and also looking at the level of surveillance that would be required, and its cost on the industry, because it'll come back to the industry. It'll be preventative vaccination, and the potential impacts on international trade and the type of species we might want to vaccinate, such as more vulnerable species like turkeys, ducks and layers. So the task force published an interim statement just last week, and we're now working on a sort of a final report to come out this summer with recommendations. And that'll say the potential, the opportunity that we might have here in the UK. We're also looking at what other countries are doing to manage their outbreaks, and I think vaccination will play that role. But we need that global acceptance of vaccination as well, that it doesn't actually have that impact on trade.
Thank you, Moira. And actually that leads me nicely on to the next sort of question, is around how the UK compares globally in terms of biosecurity management and resilience, and what we can learn from other countries, and then also what they can learn from us. Jules, would you like to start off on that one?
I think we are leaders in biosecurity. I think we have developed strategies, habits, as we were talking about, that are good and do lead the way. But obviously, as you look around the world, it depends on production systems. In more resource poor areas, we're going to struggle to implement the type of biosecurity that we have here. But there are basic principles that still apply about keeping pathogens out of your livestock. So yeah, we are leaders, but I think going back on a little bit on the vaccination thing, you still need biosecurity. You can't just ditch biosecurity because you think you've got another strategy. So I think we will always need biosecurity, and it keeps other pathogens out as well. But yeah, I think the difference, as you see, are mainly in the different way we produce. Even across Europe, there are different, with ducks and things are produced in smaller quantities on smaller farms compared to the UK. So, yeah.
Great stuff. Just moving on a little bit. So how then can technology such as real-time disease tracking and digital biosecurity tools help to strengthen our on-farm resilience? Grant, I think this is one for you, perhaps.
Great question. Thank you. Again, I think something that we're all very familiar with, and that is knowledge is power. So if you're looking at understanding your global environment, just wild bird tracking, simple little things like that can really help us prepare for outbreaks, for what's happened, looking at the data, understanding the history of what's going on. And then obviously the big one, I think that everyone sort of would love to get right and would love to nail down, is that prediction patterns. So, using technology and using those sort of tools globally, we can actually start predicting outbreaks and looking at how we can prepare red flags and where we can start putting more attention into our ecosystems and, creating that resilience within our food chain.
Absolutely. Moira, is there anything you'd like to add to that at all?
No, I think I agree with everything that Grant says. Knowledge is power, and any technology that can provide real-time alerts to potential problems is valuable, especially for strengthening on-farm resilience. Being able to track wild bird activity would be ideal, would be perfect, to give us sort of that, almost that heads up, and we are, I think, somewhere there, but there's probably more we can do so that we can intervene at a much earlier stage, and also the collaboration we have with government as well, using whether we can combine government and industry tools to learn about that sort of early prediction as well. So anything that sort of gives us that heads up beforehand would be valuable, and would reduce the number of birds culled, and it would also be a cost saving for the government.
Absolutely. Julian, is there anything else that you'd like to add as a final comment on that one?
Yes, I think using that predictive model could help us look at farms with a vulnerability. Really, we're always talking about a biosecurity score putting you up here somewhere, but you've also got this bit of vulnerability, and that is different depending on the type of farm you're running, the type of production system you've got. So your vulnerabilities on each farm are different. Now, if we could predict what might affect that vulnerability and see the risk increasing, we can target resources into that. So I think leading on from what Grant says about that predictive step, we can then target vulnerabilities rather than going blanketly, here's an umbrella, we're 90% secure. It's that 10% that you're not secure that we need to worry about. And if we can target resources most efficiently, where money is concerned or process is concerned, then I think that could be a good way to move forward.
Right. A huge amount of food for thought in that whistle-stop discussion. Thank you so much, everyone, for your insights and contribution. And it's now time to hand over to Amy, who will take us through a mini masterclass in biosecurity. Over to you, Amy.
Thank you so much. Hello, everyone. My name is Amy Davis, and I'm a biosecurity advisor at LiveTech Systems. And I'm delighted to have the opportunity today to share some of our thoughts on tackling biosecurity challenges on farm. At LiveTech, biosecurity isn't just a priority, it's our passion. And we really do live and breathe it. And we firmly believe it's the key to controlling disease on farm. And to simply put it, if you don't let disease in, you don't have to control it. And for us, getting it right means everyone on farm, knowingly or unknowingly, practices biosecurity in everything they do, and it should be as natural as breathing. Sadly, ongoing disease outbreaks across all livestock sectors show that as an industry, we're not always getting biosecurity right. And LiveTech has grown because biosecurity has failed, specifically with culling for avian influenza, salmonella, blackhead, and many more diseases. And we've learned a lot about practical on-farm biosecurity and have adapted our business to use this knowledge to help farmers and enterprises improve their biosecurity and to keep disease out. And while we've mainly focused on poultry, we're now working closely with the pig sector. And you'll notice that much of what we discussed today applies across all livestock sectors. The basic principles are the same, it's just how they're prioritised and implemented that differs. And in our experience with notifiable diseases, they've taught us many valuable lessons, and we've come to understand that biosecurity is a universal concept, and often simple changes to everyday behaviours can have a big impact. And you can see that this is a subject that we care deeply about. So I'm going to start with a big, bold question for us to think about. And it's this: if we all make biosecurity a priority every day, would we still need to cull? And being at the sharp end of poultry culling operations, we know firsthand the devastating impact that a cull can have on a business, let alone the wider industry. And I know that this impact is no less for other livestock businesses impacted by disease like TB, blue tongue, and classical swine fever. And none of these diseases have vanished, and unfortunately, new ones always seem to be looming. African swine fever, for instance, is close to our shores and could easily be with us soon. So today I'll focus on a disease that's currently causing major disruption in our poultry, meat and egg sectors, which is avian influenza. So take a look at the moving image as it illustrates rapid spread of disease. Up until 2020, avian influenza outbreaks in UK commercial poultry flocks were sporadic, but during the winter of 21 to 22, everything changed. And suddenly, over a 12-month period, up until September 22, we had 150 cases. This was then followed by an unprecedented turn of events by another 172 outbreaks between 22 and 23, totaling to around 208 cases for the year ending September 23. Then things then seemed to quieten down, and in the first 6 months of the next season, 2023 to 2024 season, we had just 6 cases. So big size of relief all round, and bird flu then seemed to kind of slip down of our list of concerns. But fast forward to now, and it's back, and it's been hitting us hard. So what are we noticing, and are there any similarities to the last outbreak? Well, yes, there are. When we look at the data, we are noticing a repeating pattern, and it's almost identical to the outbreaks that we saw 2 years ago. It's the same areas, same types of birds being infected, and even the same farms. So could we have predicted this, and have levels of biosecurity actually improved as a result? Well, the government did not predict the latest outbreak, and all the data and analysis in the early autumn led the government to conclude that there was a low risk. But what about something we can control? So on-farm biosecurity. And what we learned from that video was that there was a sharp increase in cases following a period of calm where no immediate threat seemed apparent, and during quieter times, it's easy for complacency to set in, and we might feel less urgency and lower our guard, which means taking our foot off the gas when it comes to maintaining biosecurity levels on farm. And we call this biosecurity fatigue. So when environmental disease pressure increases and then we lose focus on biosecurity, that's where diseases can spread easily. And we believe this is what is happening now. All of our birds are housed. They have no direct contact with infected wild birds, yet disease is still getting into our sealed buildings. So just something to think about there. Biosecurity is about creating a culture of preparedness all year round, and we call this Biosecurity 365. So it's 365 days of the year. It's not just during a high risk season. It should be part of your routine every day. And looking at biosecurity in practice, it can seem awfully complicated. So you can see on the slide here all of the different pathways that need to be biosecure on a typical laying farm. And I know it can look overwhelming, but in essence, on-farm biosecurity can be broken down into 2 things. So firstly, it's your structural elements. So that's your gates, your barriers, your boot dips, and the conditions of your buildings. And those procedural elements. So that is how your personnel, your staff, vehicles and animals are interacting or using these structures that are in place. And in our experience, it's normally the procedural elements that are first to break down. And we believe that biosecurity is much about mindset or behaviour change as it is about physical structures. So some examples of letting things slip might include things like forgetting to clean and disinfect our boots outside the poultry shed when it's lashing down with rain and we just want to get inside. It's continuing to buy our dairy replacements from the same markets and vendors where we know that they are in a high risk TB area, or buying our store lambs from areas where we know blue tongue has been identified. And these examples may resonate for some of you, but the key to remember is we always have the option to reduce our risk. And the best way to combat biosecurity fatigue is to keep procedures simple. And if biosecurity, the measures that you're implementing, are the easiest ways of doing things, they are more likely to be followed. And more often than not, a fresh perspective from a second pair of eyes highlights the obvious, turning what seemed like an overwhelming problem into a relatively easy fix. And this may require thought, and sometimes we might need to pause and rethink how some elements can be modified to improve biosecurity. So you can see on the screen here, there are pictures of a double and single barrier system that we use on entry into a live bird area. And this is a good example of design with many elements that make biosecurity easy. So, for example, a bench barrier, we can sit down, so we can swing our feet over to change our boots without our socked feet touching the floor. And this also avoids contamination on our hands when changing your boots normally. We'll use colour-coded boots to ensure that they're being worn in the correct areas of the farm. You can see there that we might hang overalls far away enough so you cannot grab them from the other side of the barrier. And these are good examples, but simple examples of making things easy to use, but also hard for people to circumvent. And for those cattle and sheep farmers in the audience, these barriers might be overkill and impractical, but the principle of trying to physically exclude pathogens from the livestock building is relevant. And instead, you might use quarantine facilities for new stock coming onto your farm to help avoid them walking fresh disease into your existing herd or flock. So the same principle, just a different method. So what is LiveTech doing to help livestock farmers become more biosecure? Well, historically, we've worked in a traditional advisory way, providing a face-to-face service for our customers to deliver bespoke biosecurity advice, training, and documentation.